Hey, it's Liz from No Trace. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a mesh drawstring bag for dance shoes. And this mesh is an all natural fiber, no plastic. It's made with hemp and it's fully compostable at the very end of its life. So let's go. I'm going to be making the dance shoe bag with 2 pieces of a all-natural mesh fabric. This is actually hemp mesh, and I'm going to link to where I got this in the description box below this video. These each measure 13 inches wide and 15 inches tall. I'm going to be using a scrap of fabric to construct the pocket. It's going to go on the outside of the bag. And really, you can make this pocket whatever size you want. And you're going to need 2 pieces of fabric to create the pocket, or like I have, 1 long piece of fabric that you can fold in half lengthwise. This one is 5 inches wide and it's about 14 inches tall. But again, I would just use whatever scraps you have on hand, and definitely feel free to adjust the sizes based on what's available to you. I'm also going to be using an organic cotton tag that says No Trace. I love to put one of these on all of the bags that I make, and I'll link to where I got my tags in the description box below this video. I'm also going to be using some organic cotton cord as the drawstring, and I have about a yard of cord, and I'll also link to a good source for this material in the description box. The first thing I'm going to do is construct the pocket. And like I said, I have 1 long piece of fabric. I'm just going to bring the right sides together of my fabric, and I'm going to stitch around the 3 open sides, but I'm going to leave an opening on one of the long sides so that I can turn the whole thing right side out. If you're working with 2 smaller pieces of fabric, you just want to sew them right sides together, and you want to leave an opening either on the side or on the bottom so that you can sew it up when you attach the pocket to the bag. I'm going to start my stitches at this top corner, and I'm going to sew with about a 1/4 inch seam allowance because this is kind of a narrow scrap, so I want to maximize the width of my pocket. But you could also sew this pocket up with a wider seam allowance if you're working with a wider piece of fabric than I am. And I just want to make sure to back stitch at the beginning. And then I'm going to go all the way around and leave an opening over on this side. Now I'm finished sewing the sides of the pocket, so I'm just going to turn the pocket right side out through the opening. And I'm probably going to need my chopstick, which I always forget to put it on the table when I'm making these videos. Maybe one day I'll remember. But it's not far. It's right behind me, so just takes a second. Okay, pocket is looking good here. So we just want to fold in that opening, and then we'll want to press it. Either finger press it or press it with the iron. I actually want to press the whole pocket. And with the iron now, I want to make sure that I get my opening and then go all the way around. And sometimes I will roll out the seam with my fingers to make the pocket lay a little bit more flat. Now this next step is optional. I am going to do a little top stitch on the top edge of my pocket, but you could definitely skip this step. If you want to do the top stitch, it's just going to make the pocket look a little bit more polished. I'm just going to sew straight down with about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, I got my top stitching in place. I'm not sure how well you can see that. And now I want to position the pocket on one of the pieces of mesh. This kind of has a right side and a wrong side, but I think it does not really matter which side you decide is the inside and the outside. I'm going to use this as the outside. It's just a little bit smoother. This is just a little bit rougher, but again, I don't think it really matters. So do what you like. And I want the pocket to be near the bottom. I'm probably gonna have it about 2 inches above the bottom, and I want it to be centered. So I am gonna get my ruler and just measure and see how far away it is from each side. Okay, so it's about 4 inches on this side and a little less than 4 on that side. So I'm just gonna move it over a smidge, and that looks pretty good. Okay, now I am going to pin it in place and sew it onto the mesh fabric. And I want to, of course, leave the top open and just sew around the 3 sides. And I want to make sure that I sew up the opening that I left as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put a few pins on here, and then we'll sew it in place. All right, back at the machine, I'm going to lift my presser foot and get my fabric, my pocket, up under the presser foot. And I'm gonna probably do about 1/8 of an inch, well, maybe more like 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here. And I wanna make sure to back stitch at the start and the stop of my stitches, because these are spots on the pocket that are gonna get a lot of wear and tear. Okay, the pocket is attached and there's our opening, and you can see it looks nice from the inside of the bag also. In the next step, I'm going to finish the raw edges on each of the panels of the dance shoe bag, and I am going to be finishing the top 2 inches, this top short edge, and then another 2 inches on each of these pieces of fabric. I'm going to be using a zigzag stitch. So on this Juki, that is stitch number 4, and I want to keep it kind of a short stitch. So let's do 1.2 for the length, and I don't want it to be too wide, so we'll just leave it with the default there, 3.6 millimeters for the width. So I'm starting at one of the edges, and I'm starting about 2 inches from the corner here. I'm just going to sew all the way around the short end and then 2 inches down on this other side. And that's just going to finish the raw edges for the drawstring casing when we get the drawstring in there. I finished the zigzag stitch going around the about 2 inches on each side and then the short edge. I will say it was a lot easier to do it on the lengthwise grain versus this grain of the bag, but I think it should be okay as long as you get a nice tight zigzag stitch going across there. And I also want to say that if you have a serger, you could definitely do this with a serger as well. So either serger or zigzag stitch will work great. What we're going to do next is put the 2 pieces of fabric with the right sides together. And again, you may or may not be able to tell what the right side is. And we're going to line up the edges. And then I'm going to put my little no trace tag folded over in between the layers. And I'm probably going to put it about 3 or 4 inches from the top edge and pin it in place. And I'm going to go ahead and put a few more pins to keep these 2 pieces of fabric together, and then we'll sew them up. I'm going to start my stitches about 2 inches away from this top corner. This is the edge that we're going to be using for our drawstring casing. So right about where this pink pen is, and I'm going to be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I want to put my machine back on my straight stitch setting, and I will back stitch here, and when I get back around to near my other corner, I'll do a little back stitch here at this pink pin also. Once these 2 panels of the mesh bag are joined together, I am going to be folding over the top edge about 1 inch, and I'm going to be pinning it in place, and then I'm going to sew it in place so that we have a nice little casing for the drawstring. So once one side is pinned, I'm just going to flip the bag over and fold and pin the other side. At the machine now, I'm going to kind of open up my bag so that I can sew each folded over edge separately. And I'm just going to kind of push part of the bag out of the way. So I'm just working with this top edge and I don't accidentally sew my bag closed. That would be bad. And I want to start right where the casing opens. And I want to get close to the edge, but not too close to the edge. And I'm definitely going to do a back stitch at the beginning and the end of each line of stitches. Now I know this is hard to see. I should have used a contrasting thread, but that seam is right above the zigzag stitching that I did. So we have a few rows of defense from our casing coming unraveled and opening. So we want that straight stitch to be above the zigzag stitch. After the casings are sewn in place, the next thing is to do a zigzag stitch around this raw edge all the way around 3 sides of the bag. And again, you could definitely do this at your serger or with a zigzag stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and do a zigzag stitch real quick. I've got my zigzag stitch in place. Again, I don't want it too long. I put it at 1.2 millimeters for the length. And I definitely want to do a back stitch at the beginning and the end of my stitches. I finished my zigzag stitches and I just wanted to point out to you this fabric, it's a little bit squirrely to work with. And so I had a little bit of unevenness when I was sewing the bottom edge. And I made sure that my zigzag stitch was lined up with the shorter piece of fabric, because this sort of shifted around a little bit. And then I can always trim off the extra fabric once I've sewn it. But you want to make sure that you are catching both layers if they shift around a little bit on you. Now these little bits can be composted because they're 100% natural fiber, or you can save them and use it as little bits of stuffing and things like that. I always save my little tiny thread bits in a little container on my work table. Okay, now it's time to thread the cording, and I know I said that I'm going to use about 1 yard, but I was wrong. I'm actually going to be using about 2 yards of cording for the drawstring bag. So I am going to get one of my larger safety pins and I'm going to pin it onto one end of the cording, and then I'm going to go ahead and thread it into the casing, and I'm going to thread it all the way through both sides of the bag, so both of the casings that I just sewed. I've made it back out the other side, so I'll take the safety pin off, and then I want to tie these 2 ends together in a simple, I believe this is called an overhand knot. Let me know if this knot has a different name. Also, if you're enjoying this video or learning anything, give this video a thumbs up. I really appreciate that when you do that. All right, I got the 2nd yard of cording, not fabric, and I pinned it on. Now I'm going to start threading it on the opposite end of where my knot is so that it'll come out at the opposite end of my first knot so that we can have 2 nice little pull cords on our cute little dance shoe bag. This bag would be great for all kinds of things, not just dance shoes, but that is what I am making it for. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, safety pin is through once again, and now I'll tie these 2 ends again in an overhand knot. And then our bag is almost done. I turned it right side out and I'm just testing my pulse. It looks like it works great. I am going to get busy making a second one of these because I know that each of my daughters is really going to want one of these bags. And if you're looking for other gift ideas for the dancer in your life, I'm going to link to another video right here that goes through 6 gifts that you can sew for a dancer.